Let's move on now to our wonderful panel discussion. We have panelists from different places joining us today. With me in the studio, there is Miimu Aidaksinen and Mari Hukkalainen, and then, of course, we have lots of people. William is there, Sophie's there, Olga's there, Joni's there, and Oren. Thank you for being online and participating. Let me start off with you, William. Of course, the IET Journal focuses primarily on smart cities. And, the way we see technology emerging and heavy energy consumption and everything. Do you believe that smart cities in any shape or form are actually contributing towards climate neutrality, or are they hindering its progress?
That's a very broad question. I don't think they hinder, but I think perhaps it's important to put them into perspective, as many have already. For example, we've heard a bit about how transportation is one of the key areas of emission. Transportation is typically something that happens on a national basis, with national policies directing people towards electric vehicles and things like that. It's probably quite difficult to do that strongly on a city basis, although of course you can have certain policies like London has for low climate areas. I think there's something cities can do. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think by and large they have to fit within national policies, and they can sort of help those national policies. But it seems unlikely that cities alone could make the significant change that as a whole globe that we need to see.
Yeah, Miimu, let me move to you. You raised a very important and I think interesting aspect when you talk about biodiversity. So, of course, it has been a priority theme for many times. But again, when many discussions around climate neutral cities, or if we talk about smart cities, biodiversity is somehow put to the side. I just want to check with you, how does climate neutrality or smart cities support biodiversity, and also the other way around? How does biodiversity, for example, contribute towards climate neutrality?
It's a super good question, and I think it's kind of like, biodiversity is in that way super important that when we think about the material use, so always when we use raw materials, so we are actually consuming biodiversity or harming biodiversity. So that's why kind of like circular economy is really key for kind of like, and using kind of like existing elements already, reusing things. So that is one thing which is super important, because 80% of the biodiversity effects is actually occurring off-site, meaning when we are preparing the materials. So really circular economy solutions is one part. And then of course kind of like that how smart cities are part of the biodiversity is of course also that we are bringing the biodiversity into the cities and also as a part of the climate change solution. So that is biodiversity-rich areas are supporting the climate change adaptations, but also kind of like the things that we are supporting the well-being, and in that sense also kind of like increasing the city attractiveness. And of course kind of like all the solutions which we are doing for biodiversity, so that is kind of like the sink of CO2 as well. So in this way it supports in many ways our climate neutrality targets as well.
Yep, wonderful. Mari, let me move to you. Of course, you talked about how Finnish cities are progressing towards climate neutrality. For some, it's 2030 stated over there. For some, it goes a bit beyond and even that. You also talked about compensation mechanisms. But if I were to, broadly ask you, what are the major challenges cities are actually facing on their journey towards climate neutrality? And if you could focus more towards the Nordic cities, because, us and Sweden, we share a similar environment.
Definitely. So how I see it, I think that the biggest issue is the emission gap, definitely. So like on the transport sector emissions are kind of like the most difficult sector to reduce to, and that because there is no single actor who can decide. It's kind of way easier to have been working with the energy sector because there are fewer actors who are actually making the decisions, and the systems like still like even if a district heating system is developed into a distributed one, but still like it's not so much about how the people are behaving, whereas when we are talking about transport, it is about how people are behaving, how they are moving around. Of course, there's also like the heavy-duty transport, the logistics, and so on, but still that is the most difficult thing. And then the other big thing is then that how to finance the different climate actions that are needed. That's the kind of that is the point where I think that we all are still like need to develop further that our capabilities.
Yeah, Olga, if I put that same question again, to you, and, if you share your perspective primarily from the Swedish city side and, of course, Nordic cities in general. So how are we progressing and what are our challenges?
Yeah, so I think that's very similar. So transportation mobility sector as a large sector, which is hard to work on transition with, but we can make progress, definitely. More things should be done, but also construction sector, I would say, building construction, going to circular economy, and this is also using the material. So material use, it's huge emission. We are not like all the embedded carbon kind of it's having a huge impact on kind of global emissions, and the problem is of course that we are still having our economic systems that would price use of Jungfru materials instead of this kind of the circular economy, and so it's kind of this is a problem that we are like on one side we know what we can do, so we know that we can have reduce emission from building construction sector both from materials and the machines in half very quickly. So it's not the rocket science. We don't need to innovate more, but those kind of financial instruments are there to do that. So I would say like these two sectors are very large and uncomplicated, but so we have a lot of hopes that together we can solve in those problems. One thing which we are like I talked a little bit about this maritime. I mean, this kind of also transportation with water. So we will maybe, especially with like cities, we are talking a little bit less about, but we have many harbor cities. Also, like in Finland, you have many harbor cities, and then all this kind of electrification work and the kind of harbor work is interesting as well. So, and we can have a lot of influence and contribute to the carbon emission. So, and I mean, the scope 3 consumption-based emission is hard to address as well. So it's a lot of challenges, but also there are a lot of solutions and hope.
Sophie, if I now come to you, you shared, a comprehensive approach on, how to monitor progress towards climate neutrality. And I was just wondering, because I think in some of your talk over there, I did notice the role of society there also. And how much leverage does society have on climate neutrality? And if I were to, give a particular example that, we have certain visible emissions, which as normal citizens, we can see transport being primarily one of them, or let's say certain power plants, and then the invisible ones. Because again, when we talk about construction, we talk about our environment. We need houses, we need to maintain them, we need to build them. So again, the emissions are not directly visible over there. So again, how do you see the role of citizens in, first of all, understanding the situation, and secondly, in contributing towards not just reduction in emissions, but actually our transition towards climate neutrality?
Yeah, that's a big and interesting question. I mean, obviously, society has a major part to play here. In the end, I think ultimately it all comes down to us, the people. We are the ones who need to make also the transition in changing basically our lifestyles to some degrees, and changing the way we live, the way we commute, the way we travel, the way we everything, basically. So yes, we have a large part. And then how do we reach out to society? I think for Viable Cities, we have the local transition arenas as a key tool where we really try to make the local arena meet. We have academia, we have civil society, we have public sector, we have business sector coming together. Sometimes there are even local climate city contracts where all these come together. And You might recall in my very rushed presentation of our 10 commitments that commitment number 9 is about citizen engagement. So that is obviously also key to really work with the citizen and make sure that they are part of this journey with us, and that they are make them, I think, really give them agency, I think is important, to ensure that all of us know that we are all important players here. This is not something that happens on the abstract global or international or even national arena. It actually happens on the local arena. It happens in our everyday lives.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that. Maybe it's not the topic of the discussion now, but I would say, reach out to Mari, anybody who's online, because we have some interesting cases here in Finland where I think it's not just citizen engagement, but we dare to call it citizen co-creation. So again, it's like, some region, some district, or some city actually showing that, well, this is what we plan to do, and then get the citizens to actually, well, I wouldn't say rip it apart. I mean, that's a big word, but, to actually help and tweak that to their needs and wishes. So we've had cases in designing certain buildings, spaces. We've even had cases in Finland where kindergarten children actually jumped in and said, no, this is how we're going to design these. This was related to biodiversity and, nature-based solutions. But now, Joni and Oren, let me get to you guys. I mean, you have amazing tools which are supporting cities in the monitoring process. But are you having something which can allow to even compare cities, like similar cities, for example? Of course, every city is unique. They have their own mechanisms, styles, governance, you name it. To actually learn from each other and furthermore, not just to monitor, but actually do some predictions. Well, this is what you still need to do, and this is how you need to move forward. So, Joni, let's start with you, and then, Oren, we get to you.
Yes, thank you. That is an important topic, and we try to make that easy for cities to learn from each other. So all our cities platforms are open, so other cities can visit and see what other cities are doing. They can search across the platforms to find if cities have similar actions somewhere, and also they can use same indicators, and then they can compare directly how one city is doing across the other ones. But that is not very common, because then you have to kind of agree beforehand what that indicator is. But we're nudging cities to publish and share and learn from others and share these lessons learned.
Oren?
Yeah, so this is very much what we're trying to do with eCLI USA 300 plus members, is to create this common framework, understanding of data, of what is an intervention, what is a target, a yearly target, and using the same framework. And therefore, it's so important to have a common framework in simple language, a common language. And this in Scotland or all of Ruhr or the leading cities in the Netherlands or the 10 biggest Austrian cities, they're all actually looking now at the same data points to measure cyclists or to measure solar panels. They're using the same language for interventions, which each one is sorted and connected to the same open source framework. They're using the same systematic processes of doing step number 1, number 2, number 3, 4. So it's an absolutely full comparison. And what we're now also doing is that we're having open a library. So let's take Scotland as an example. Every city says, okay, this is an intervention, an action that I want to publish to the other cities. And they press publish. And then it goes into a library that is the Liberian, so to say, is the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service. And they curate this library and publish it all the time. So they're really learning very, very quickly and working actually together side by side. And what's for me incredible is those bigger cities, Glasgow, Edinburgh, with big teams working together with the smallest local authorities that don't have barely any climate people at all. So
William,
yes, this is a main thing.
Yeah. William, let me get back to you. Again, you've been doing a lot of research on smart cities and in different contexts. And so, how do you see the role of smart technologies to support climate neutrality? And What should we be, let's say, on the lookout for?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think a lot of what we have is already what we do is already in place. As I mentioned in my opening talk, there's a lot that can be done actually with Google, with simple electricity measurements of what buildings are doing. But I think there's more that can be done, and there's some interesting areas that are not so intuitive. So I always remember being struck by statistics that said that something like 20% of all the traffic in a city is people driving around looking for parking spaces. So simply by making parking spaces very readily available and having a lot of knowledge about exactly where the space is, you can actually reduce emissions by 20% related to transport quite quickly. So it strikes me that actually some of those kind of areas could be quite helpful for smart cities to build on. And indeed, as I mentioned, there already is in most cities a fair amount of information about parking. There'll be signs saying this car park has got this many spaces and so on. So building on that, I think could be quite helpful for those kind of areas. And the other area that's also worth drilling into is just understanding the balance between cars or other vehicles with internal combustion engines versus electric vehicles, and seeing how that varies over time. And clearly that can be done generally by simply monitoring the number plates and then using a database that most countries have that allow that to be then looked at the vehicle make and understand the balance that's going on there. So I think there's all sorts of things like that can be done, maybe are being done already in some cases, that can actually help out. And I suspect we'll see lots more of those emerge over time. But I think there's often some neat, simple fixes for many of these solutions that can be done building upon things like mobile phone data and other things like that.
Olga, let me start off with you, and then Mari, I'll have the same question to you. I mean, both of you have been working a lot and very extensively when it comes to climate neutrality in Swedish, Finnish cities, and of course at a European scale. So do you see technology, where are the bottlenecks, dare I say, with technology from a city perspective? And of course, let's not get into costs, because I know that, cities really don't have money. They have limited investments to do on different things, but otherwise, where do you see technological bottlenecks?
Yeah, as I'm working at the Royal Institute of Technology, and of course, I cannot say that technology is not important, but I think that honestly, so we have a lot of technological development, so we can do much more with what exists. So I would say the biggest bottleneck is not to develop the new technology, but to implement technologies that exist in the large scales, all those new materials, solutions to energy systems. And so maybe through the energy system, what we want to see is like further development of batteries and energy storage. I would say this would be very interesting. Also, I think as for Sweden, again, the question is for us, like from the energy system, especially from cooling and heating, our biggest problem is plastic, because we are we're having incineration of waste as a kind of important element of district heating in Sweden. And the whole kind of questions about plastic, about plastic recycling. So it's also not a technological. We have interesting and new technology developed. The question is that we don't have the secondary market for plastic, and we don't have certification of plastic. So I would say, yeah, so it would be good to have more of the energy storage solutions that are cheaper and more reliable on one side, but more on implementation of what we have.
Mari, if I come to you, and I know there's lots of technologies out there which small companies have built, big companies. We at VTT are at the forefront of many of these technologies. But what do you see as the key bottleneck for cities in implementing some of these technologies?
I think that it's perhaps it's easiest to approach this through the practical kind of examples. So if thinking about the mobility and transport emissions, again, one part is the electrification, how to really practically develop further the EV charging infrastructure, for example. Who is deciding where they are placed? Usually cities, but then on the other hand, it's the really the logistical and the transport companies, like we need data to base our decisions on it. So I would say that like data and like having an overall the systemic viewpoint when like bringing these new technologies and implementing this, as what Olga was saying, like how, like really that the bottleneck is on how to implement this. I fully agree with that. That like how to bring those into practice in a systemic manner when like the systems are aligned.
Yeah. And now, Sophia, I'd like to move to you perhaps and get some insights. Now, of course, the majority of your work has been around Swedish cities.
Yep.
And so are there any lessons, we can learn towards, let's say, cities in different climatic zones? If we talk about Asia, Africa, Central, Europe, Latin America, whatever, what can we actually take over there? Of course, people talk about electrification a lot. Let's move to electric vehicles and much more. But then in many of these places, they're still using coal-powered power plants to generate the electricity. So what are some, lessons or ideas which you believe we can share with them?
I would like to, rather than look at specific solutions or technologies that could be transferred, I would like to instead then look at which practices can be transferred, what can we take from, for example, the Swedish or the Finnish examples in terms of local governance and the alignment with other governing levels, for example, regional or national levels. Like I said in my presentation, which are the essential building blocks that we identify here as critical for accelerating a transition or for providing some kind of fertile ground for creating a transformation that could be adopted by other countries, other cities. Of course, then bearing in mind their context in terms of their climatic zones or their political system or other factors that you need to consider. I know you mentioned, for example, the energy system, and yes, we have different opportunities when it comes to energy production, but I would argue that you could always try to look into successful examples, for example, in deployment of renewable energy, and try to see which were the essential building blocks for that works in one context. Could some of that be adopted in this other context to, for example, support a transition away from coal as the primary energy source? But these are really big and complex issues. It's really not as simple as that. And just, you can't just look and see that worked and I will do that exactly the same. But maybe it could be something that gives political courage or that gives civic courage to move in that direction. But again, especially the energy question is it is complicated for many reasons, and energy obviously is a key to all societies. So we need to be humble to the fact that we need to power our nations, and let's look at the good examples and see what we can adopt from them. I think that would be my answer.
Mimu, let me come to you. I know you've been doing research on smart cities, energy in cities, and so much more over, I'm not going to say how many years we know each other and do that discloses our ages, but no, just jokes aside. But what is your view on this? I mean, how has the transition been happening? Are we getting over-flooded with technology, or are we slow on implementation? Of course, there has been exponential growth in many things, but what more is needed, and where do we stand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a good question. And I think there is as already stated, there is good technologies already existing. And I think it's more like that we have many technologies and we are maybe a bit too conservative also to adapt. Part of it, it's about construction technology and also energy technologies. Both of those disciplines are very conservative, and I think it's good that they are conservative because we need to have stable energy and we need to have stable infrastructure and buildings because we hope that they are staying there hundreds or 200 years. So that's why we need to be sure that we have technologies which are really reliable and resilient. But at the same time, we should be more flexible in implementing and also in standardization, because quite often the standardization or permission to use that in the infrastructures or in somewhere, that takes too much time. And that is maybe I think the biggest hindering thing there that we could really implement much quicker the things. So kind of like really having that in place, and also kind of like in Europe, we have a bit different things in Finland and Sweden, and a bit different ways to implement and ways to approve, and even inside Finland, kind of like a bit different. In Helsinki, you can do something, and in Oulu, we have a bit different kind of like ways to work and approve things to implement. So this is kind of like that really more and more harmonization and quicker standardization and kind of like to make that. So I think that would be really, because I think there is excellent technologies existing, and we just need to kind of like really put that in the track and implement.
And Joni and Oren, let me come to you. I mean, of course, you deal a lot with data. You deal with data harmonization and, all of these things. So what do you see as bottlenecks when it comes to availability or access of data? I mean, of course, I know you are picking up a lot of open data because European cities are at the forefront when it comes to releasing open data. But then, of course, many cities, they have these massive legacy systems. So how are you able to deal or capture data from them? What are your thoughts?
Yes, that is a major problem for cities when they want to do climate inventories or projections in the future. And I think the major problem is that the cities would need resources and expertise to know where the data is and how to collect that. And it's different in every city. Of course, there are some national data sources that everyone can use, but quite a lot of that information is somewhere inside the city administration, and it's difficult to get or difficult to know who to ask. And we have tried to help cities in that city, inside city collaboration, so that they could easily work and collect with the data. But there is clearly a room for harmonization in there, and it might help if there was some kind of, in Finland we have these national registries of buildings and such, so that even if cities originally collect the data, it would be easier to get that data from a national source if it's collected in a centralized way. So that kind of solutions could work. It would be easier for cities rather than trying to find a colleague from an administration. Like Helsinki has 40,000 employees, so it's not easy to know who knows that specific thing that you need.
Exactly.
Here in Climate View, we're thinking that it's not the data points you want to start asking about, it's the questions you want to answer. That's where you start. If you're interested in the shifts of cycling, solar panels, heat pumps, or production of energy, what data points do we need? But first, answering the question, what do we need? So to go to the Scottish example, in order to do dashboards for all the local authorities, we had to create a data playbook. So the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service, together with us, and they did a lot of work, created one common playbook. This is what we did in the Netherlands with 10, 15 stakeholders, both government bodies and private, and create an official data playbook. And this is what UTTC is doing in Sweden now to create such a book. So for us to have a transparent book that is very doable in each country, there is going to be quality differences in different countries, but it has to be on a national level. And this is what we're doing now and publishing those in country after country.
Thank you very much. And I could go on and on with all of you for several hours, but we're running short of time. So before we end, I'd just like a quick answer from each of you. So starting with William, then Mimu, then Mari, then Olga, then Sophie, then Joni, then Orange, is that if we talk about cities, what should they be doing? Climate mitigation or climate adaptation? Yeah, it's a tough one, I know.
A difficult question and probably outside of my expertise.
But give it a shot.
I think they should probably adapt as best they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they should adapt that, but at the same time they should mitigate. I mean, it's not either or, but both.
Mari.
I also both, but mitigation.
Olga.
Både och också med. Och sedan att jag fattar inte att folk inte ser hur klimatanpassning och klimatomställning hänger ihop och hur många lösningar, inte minst de naturbaserade lösningar som vi pratat ju om, så levererar till både och. Så jag tycker att det är också en kunskapsbyggande fråga och konkreta, alltså visa på konkreta åtgärder som leder till både och.
Sorry, you're speaking in Swedish and some of our audience don't understand it.
Sorry.
It's
sorry.
almost.
So I was just like, yeah, it's a passionate answer. Yeah, sorry. So no, I'm thinking both and also we have so much of research showing this kind of synergy between climate mitigation and climate adaptation. This is the way to go. So we have a lot of examples when those same measures are leading both for adaptation and mitigation. And I think that we need to focus on those ones that are both delivering on mitigation and adaptation, but also now on civil preparedness.
Sophie.
Exactly what Olga said. They strengthen each other. So let's focus on where we can have both and where we do not have to choose.
Joni?
Yeah, definitely both. And of course, the less you do mitigation, the more you have to do adaptation, and that is not a nice way to go.
Oren, what's your experience?
Yeah, I'm a mitigation guy, and that's the long-term thing we have to do. But unfortunately, we have to already now do both.
Very good. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. It's been a pleasure listening to your talks and having this conversation. Like I said, this could go on forever. But we are going to have a break now for 45 minutes. So please make sure to stretch, get some fresh air, have lunch if you can, and then we will continue. In the meantime, please feel free to send in any questions you have, and then we will meet in 45 minutes. And just to let you know that we will have 2 sessions. One will be on data-driven approaches for climate action, and then the other one on energy innovation and sector contributions. And of course, we'll also have a panel discussion wrap-up. So thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing all of you in 45 minutes.